Mother Bear, trapped under a fallen tree. What the baby did to free her melted hearts everywhere. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning sun filtered through the dense forest canopy, casting dappled shadows across the wooden porch of the small cabin where Savannah Reed rocked her 15-month-old daughter, Lily. The little girl giggled as a blue jay swooped past, her tiny fingers reaching out as if trying to catch the bird mid-flight. Savannah smiled, breathing in the crisp mountain air that carried the scent of pine and wild raspberries. "Look, sweetheart," Savannah whispered, pointing to a family of deer cautiously emerging from between the trees. "They're saying good morning." Lily clapped her hands in delight, her hazel eyes wide with wonder. The little family had only moved to the cabin 3 months ago, leaving behind the noise and chaos of city life. Savannah's husband, Connor, had inherited the property from his grandfather and suggested they try living closer to nature. At first, Savannah had hesitated, worried about raising a baby so far from civilization, but now she couldn't imagine a more perfect place for Lily to grow up. Connor appeared at the door, his hair still damp from the shower. "I'm heading down to the stream to check the fishing traps," he said, kissing Savannah on the cheek. "Should be back in about an hour." "We'll be fine," Savannah replied, adjusting Lily on her lap. "I'm going to pick some berries for breakfast. There's a great patch just past the big oak." Connor nodded, grabbing his fishing gear before making his way down the narrow dirt path that led into the woods. Savannah watched him until he disappeared among the trees, then turned her attention back to Lily, who was now attempting to crawl toward a colorful butterfly that had landed on the porch steps. "Not so fast, little explorer," Savannah laughed, scooping up her daughter. "Let's get you ready for our berry-picking adventure." What Savannah didn't know was that deeper in the forest, a mother bear and her cub were also foraging for breakfast. The massive brown bear moved cautiously, teaching her young cub which berries were safe to eat, which mushrooms to avoid, and how to spot the tracks of other animals. The cub bounded playfully around its mother, occasionally wandering too far and receiving a gentle nudge back to safety. Neither Savannah nor the mother bear could have predicted how their worlds would collide that morning, or the extraordinary chain of events that would leave everyone who heard the story breathless with disbelief. As Savannah finished packing a small bag with water, snacks, and Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit, she noticed dark clouds gathering in the distance. The weather could change quickly in the mountains, and she decided to hurry so they could return before any storm hit. She placed Lily in the baby carrier on her back and set off toward the berry patch, humming a lullaby that made the little girl coo with contentment. Just as they reached the clearing where wild raspberries grew in abundance, a deafening crack shattered the peaceful morning. Savannah froze, clutching Lily's legs protectively. The sound had come from somewhere deeper in the forest, followed by a thunderous crash that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. Birds erupted from the trees in panicked flight, and the forest fell eerily silent for several heartbeats. Then, a sound that made Savannah's blood run cold, a pained, guttural roar that could only belong to one creature, a bear. Savannah's instincts screamed at her to turn back, to run to the safety of their cabin and lock the doors. But something else caught her attention. Behind the roar of pain was another sound, higher-pitched and desperate, the frightened cry of a bear cub. Something terrible had happened, and without understanding why, Savannah felt compelled to move closer, if only to see if there was any way to help. "We'll just take a quick peek," she whispered to Lily, who had fallen strangely quiet, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. "Then we'll go straight home and call forest services." Cautiously, Savannah moved toward the source of the commotion, careful to stay downwind and hidden among the trees. What she saw when she reached a small ridge overlooking a ravine made her gasp in horror. A massive pine tree had fallen, likely weakened by recent storms, and beneath its enormous trunk lay a large brown bear, pinned to the ground and struggling desperately to free herself. Nearby, a small cub paced anxiously, occasionally approaching its mother before darting away in fear. The mother bear's eyes were wild with pain and terror as she clawed at the ground, trying to drag herself out from under the crushing weight. Each movement only seemed to cause her more agony, her roars gradually weakening as exhaustion set in. The cub's plaintive cries grew more frantic, sensing its mother's distress. Savannah knew bears were dangerous, especially a wounded one with a cub to protect. Yet she couldn't tear her eyes away from the heartbreaking scene. The mother's desperate struggle to survive, to protect her young one. It resonated with something primal within Savannah's own heart. "Oh, little one," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes, "your mama's in trouble." As if understanding her words, Lily squirmed in the carrier, making small distressed sounds that matched the bear cub's cries. Savannah carefully removed Lily from the carrier and held her close, intending to comfort her before they retreated to safety. What happened next would become the stuff of local legend, a moment so extraordinary that even those who witnessed it would question their own eyes. Lily suddenly twisted in Savannah's arms with surprising strength, pointing insistently toward the trapped bear and making urgent babbling sounds. Before Savannah could tighten her grip, Lily somehow slipped free and took several wobbly steps forward, dangerously close to the edge of the ridge. "Lily!" Savannah gasped, lunging forward to catch her daughter, but she was too late. The world seemed to slow down as little Lily tumbled down the gentle slope toward the very thing most mothers would run from, a wounded, frightened wild bear and her protective cub. Savannah's heart hammered against her ribs as she scrambled down the ridge after her daughter. Time stretched like taffy as she watched Lily roll to a stop just 15 feet from the trapped bear. The massive animal's eyes locked onto the tiny human, nostrils flaring and teeth partially bared in a grimace of pain and fear. "Lily, don't move, baby," Savannah whispered, afraid that any sudden movement or loud sound might trigger the bear's defensive instincts. Her mouth went dry as the bear's cub scampered behind a nearby boulder, peering out with curious black eyes. Savannah inched forward, calculating how quickly she could snatch Lily and retreat to safety. But what happened next defied everything she thought she knew about wild animals. Lily, seemingly oblivious to the danger, pushed herself up to a sitting position and stared directly at the trapped mother bear. Then, with a soft coo, she extended her small hand in a gesture that seemed almost like an offering of help. The massive bear went still, her labored breathing the only sound in the suddenly quiet forest. "Mama," Lily babbled, pointing at the bear and then at the fallen tree. "Mama hurt." Savannah froze halfway down the slope, torn between the maternal instinct to protect her child and the astonishing scene unfolding before her. The bear had stopped struggling. Instead, she was watching Lily with an intensity that seemed almost intelligent. "Connor," Savannah breathed, wishing desperately that her husband would appear. But he was far away at the stream, unaware of the life-or-death drama taking place. Gathering her courage, Savannah slid the rest of the way down the slope, moving slowly and deliberately. "It's okay," she said softly, unsure if she was reassuring Lily, the bear, or herself. "We're going to help." The bear's eyes shifted to Savannah, wary but no longer panicked. Blood matted the fur on her hind leg where the tree had pinned her, and Savannah could see that the situation was dire. Without help, the animal would die here, leaving her cub orphaned. Just then, A new sound cut through the tense silence. Human voices, gruff and loud, approaching from the forest to the east. "Should be right around here," a man's voice called. "Saw the tracks this morning. Big female with a cub." "Trophy size for sure," another voice replied with disturbing eagerness. "Game warden won't know if we don't tell him." Poachers. Savannah's blood ran cold. She glanced at the trapped bear, who had begun struggling again, clearly distressed by the new voices. The animal understood the threat even better than Savannah did. Making a split-second decision that some might call reckless and others would call compassionate, Savannah scooped up Lily and darted behind the fallen tree, pressing her finger to her lips to signal quiet. From this position they were hidden from the approaching hunters but terrifyingly close to the wounded bear. The mother bear's head swiveled toward them, and for a breathless moment Savannah thought she had made a fatal mistake, but instead of aggression, she saw something like desperate pleading in those intelligent brown eyes. Two mothers, both facing danger, both trying to protect their young. "I won't let them hurt you," Savannah whispered fiercely. The sound of breaking branches grew louder as the poachers approached. Through a gap in the foliage, Savannah could make out two men in camouflage, one carrying a rifle with a scope, the other clutching a wicked-looking hunting knife. They hadn't spotted the fallen tree yet, or the bear trapped beneath it. Savannah's mind raced. She couldn't confront armed hunters directly. That would put both Lily and herself in danger. She couldn't run without revealing their position, and she couldn't simply hide and watch as they discovered and killed the defenseless bear. An idea formed, risky, but possibly their only option. Slowly, Savannah reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen showed no signal, typical for this remote part of the forest, but that didn't matter for what she had in mind. She turned the volume to maximum and found the video she was looking for, a recording of Connor starting up their old truck with its distinctive ear-splitting backfire. Her finger hovered over the play button as she waited for the hunters to draw closer. The bear watched her every move, as if somehow understanding that Savannah was planning something. The cub had crept closer to its mother, pressing against her massive head in a gesture of comfort that made Savannah's throat tighten with emotion. "Just a little closer," Savannah breathed, watching the poachers through the foliage. When they were about 30 yards away, she pressed play. The sound of the engine roaring to life, followed by the sharp crack of the backfire, amplified by the phone's speakers, echoed through the trees. The men immediately dropped to a crouch, heads swiveling toward the sound. "Someone's here," the first man hissed. "Game warden?" "Can't be," his companion muttered. "Wasn't scheduled for patrol today." "Not taking chances," the first decided quickly. "Too close. We'll come back tomorrow when it's clear." To Savannah's immense relief, the men retreated, their footsteps fading into the distance. She slumped against the tree trunk, cradling Lily close, her heart still pounding from the close call, but they weren't safe yet. The mother bear was still trapped, growing weaker by the minute, and the poachers would likely return. Somehow, Savannah needed to free the animal and get herself and Lily back to the cabin before anything else went wrong. "Connor," she whispered, willing her husband to somehow sense that they needed him. As if the universe had heard her plea, a familiar voice called out from the distance. "Savannah? Lily? Where are you?" Connor's voice sent a wave of relief washing over her. Savannah was about to call back when she hesitated, glancing at the bear. Would Connor's sudden appearance startle the animal into aggression? Would he even believe what she was trying to do? As these thoughts raced through her mind, Lily squirmed in her arms and let out a delighted squeal. "Da-da!" The sound carried through the forest, and Savannah heard Connor's footsteps quicken. "Savannah!" Is that Lily? Answer me, there was no hiding now. Taking a deep breath, Savannah called back, Connor! We're over here by the fallen pine, but she hesitated. You need to come slowly, don't run, and don't bring anything that looks like a weapon. What? Why? Are you hurt? The worry in his voice was palpable. We're fine, she assured him, keeping her voice steady despite the surreal situation. But there's a bear, a mother bear trapped under a tree, and we're trying to help her. There was a long pause. Then Connor's voice, closer now but deliberate and controlled. I'm coming. Stay exactly where you are. The bear's eyes moved between Savannah and the direction of Connor's voice, her massive body tense but no longer struggling. The cub whimpered, pressing closer to its mother's face, and Lily echoed the sound with a sympathetic whimper of her own. It was in that moment, watching her daughter's instinctive empathy for another young creature in distress, that Savannah knew with unshakable certainty they were doing the right thing. Dangerous, yes. Possibly foolish, certainly. But right. Connor emerged from the trees, stopping dead in his tracks as he took in the scene, his face drained of color. Savannah, he said with forced calmness, I need you to very carefully bring Lily and come to me. Now. Savannah met his gaze steadily. We can't leave her, Connor. There are poachers in these woods. I heard them. If we leave, she'll die, and her cub will be orphaned. Connor's expression shifted from fear to confusion. Poachers? Here? But this is protected land. That's why they're here, Savannah explained. Easy targets, no witnesses. They were coming this way when I scared them off, but they'll be back. Connor ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Savannah knew meant he was weighing options, thinking through a problem. His eyes moved from his wife and daughter to the bear and her cub, then to the massive tree trunk. This is insane, he muttered. But there was a note of resignation in his voice that told Savannah he wasn't going to fight her on this. That tree must weigh a ton. We'd need equipment, machinery. Or leverage, Savannah said, nodding toward a sturdy-looking branch that had broken off when the tree fell. Physics, Connor. Remember how your grandfather taught you to move those boulders when you were clearing land for the garden? A ghost of a smile touched Connor's lips. Using the earth as a fulcrum. His eyes narrowed as he studied the fallen tree, mentally calculating angles and pressure points. It might work, if we can lift it just enough for her to pull free. We have to try, Savannah urged. Connor stepped closer, moving with the same slow deliberation Savannah had used. The bear watched him, her eyes intelligent and wary but no longer panicked. Perhaps she was too weak to fight, or perhaps, and this thought sent a shiver down Savannah's spine, perhaps she understood their intentions. I'll need to get very close to position the lever, Connor said quietly. If she lashes out, she won't, Savannah said with more confidence than she felt. She knows we're trying to help. As if to confirm her words, the mother bear made a soft huffing sound, and then, astonishingly, laid her massive head on the ground in what almost looked like submission. The cub watched from a few feet away, its small body trembling with anxiety. Lily squirmed in Savannah's arms again, reaching toward the bear cub with obvious interest. Baby, she said clearly, one of the few words in her limited vocabulary. The bear cub tilted its head, its natural curiosity temporarily overriding fear. In any other circumstance, this would be heartwarming. Two young creatures recognizing something in each other. But here, with so much at stake, it only amplified the tension. Connor, seizing the moment of calm, approached the fallen tree and began examining how best to position the makeshift lever. I think I can wedge it here, he said, indicating a spot where a rock outcropping could serve as a fulcrum. But once I start lifting, things might get chaotic fast. The bear could panic, or the tree could shift unexpectedly. Savannah nodded, backing away to a safer distance with Lily. "We're ready. Just be careful." Connor positioned the lever and braced himself to apply pressure. "On 3, he muttered. 1, 2, 3. With a grunt of effort, he pushed down on the branch. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protesting wood, the tree trunk shifted slightly, lifting perhaps 6 inches off the ground. Not much, but possibly enough. "Now!" Connor called through gritted teeth, his muscles straining with the effort of holding the weight. "If she's going to move, it has to be now." The bear seemed to understand. With a tremendous effort, she began dragging herself forward, her powerful front legs clawing at the earth. But she was weak from blood loss and exhaustion, and after moving just a few inches, she collapsed again, still partially trapped. "I can't hold it much longer," Connor warned, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Savannah looked from her struggling husband to the bear, desperation mounting. They were so close. Then, without warning, Lily wriggled free from her arms and toddled forward before Savannah could stop her. "Lily, no!" Savannah cried, lunging after her daughter. But Lily was already approaching the bear cub, her small hands extended in friendly greeting. The cub, instead of retreating, moved to meet her. What happened next would be etched in Savannah's memory forever. The bear cub, upon reaching Lily, turned and scampered to its mother's side. With insistent paws, it began tugging at the mother bear's fur, as if trying to help pull her free. The mother bear, seeing her cub so close to danger, found some final reserve of strength. With a mighty heave that made Connor stumble backward, she pulled herself completely free of the tree trunk, which crashed back to the ground with a thunderous impact. For one frozen moment, Savannah was certain they were all going to die. The mother bear, now free, rose to her full height, an enormous, powerful predator towering over Lily, who stood transfixed beside the bear cub. "Don't move," Connor breathed, inching toward his daughter with painfully slow steps. But instead of attacking, the mother bear lowered her head to nuzzle her cub, then turned her gaze to Lily. The massive animal huffed softly, her breath ruffling Lily's fine hair, then gently nudged the child with her nose. So gently, it was barely a touch. Lily giggled and, to her parents' horror and amazement, placed her tiny palm on the bear's muzzle in a gesture that could only be described as a caress. "Bye-bye, baby," she said to the cub, then toddled back to her stunned mother as casually as if she'd just petted a neighbor's dog. The mother bear watched them for a long moment, her intelligent eyes moving from Lily to Savannah to Connor, as if memorizing their faces. Then, with a final huff that sounded almost like a sigh, she nudged her cub and limped away into the forest, leaving 3 humans standing in speechless wonder. Connor was the first to break the silence, gathering Lily into his arms and checking her for injuries. "Did that really just happen?" he asked, his voice unsteady. "Did our daughter just pet a wild bear and survive?" Savannah couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks as the enormity of what they'd experienced washed over her. Not just the danger they'd survived, but the connection they'd witnessed, a moment of understanding between species that defied explanation. In the days that followed, they would report the poachers to the authorities, who would increase patrols in the area. They would check the news anxiously for reports of bear attacks or sightings, but hear nothing. Life would return to its normal rhythm, yet not quite the same. Because sometimes, on quiet mornings when the mist still clung to the trees, Savannah would catch glimpses of movement at the forest's edge, a large shadow accompanied by a smaller one. And Lily, growing more talkative by the day, would sometimes stop playing to point toward the trees and say, clear as day, "Bear friends." Connor suggested once that perhaps they should move back to the city, where the dangers were known and predictable. But Savannah knew they never would. Their lives had been changed forever by that morning in the forest, not just by the danger they had faced, but by the unexpected bond they had formed. Some things, she told Connor as they watched Lily sleeping peacefully that night, are worth the risk. And deep in the forest, a mother bear taught her cub to forage and hunt and survive, occasionally pausing to sniff the air when the wind carried the scent of the strange little human family that had, against all odds, become something like friends. But this wasn't the end of their story. In fact, it was just the beginning of a connection that would continue to astonish everyone who heard of it, and would soon put their peaceful existence to an even greater test. 3 weeks passed since the encounter with the mother bear and her cub. The forest had settled back into its familiar rhythm, birds singing from dawn till dusk, deer grazing cautiously in the meadow beyond the cabin. Connor had reinforced the fencing around their small vegetable garden after discovering something had been sampling the ripening tomatoes during the night. Probably raccoons, he told Savannah over breakfast, though his eyes drifted toward the tree line with a knowing look. Savannah nodded, not believing it for a second. The neat, careful way the ripe fruits had been removed, without damaging the surrounding plants, spoke of a deliberate gentleness that raccoons rarely displayed. But neither of them mentioned the alternative. It seemed too fantastical, even after what they'd experienced. Lily, now babbling more words each day, had developed a new habit. Each morning she would toddle to the large kitchen window that faced the forest and press her small palms against the glass, staring intently into the trees as if waiting for something. Sometimes she would tap the window gently and call out, "Bear friends, come play." On this particular morning, as Connor left to drive into town for supplies, Savannah was washing dishes when she heard Lily squeal with delight from the living room. The sound held such pure joy that Savannah smiled reflexively, but then froze as Lily called out words that sent a chill down her spine. "Bear, bear, come, Mama, look." Savannah dropped the plate she was washing, barely registering the sound of it shattering on the floor as she rushed to the living room. Lily stood at the large picture window, bouncing on her toes and pointing excitedly toward the forest edge, about 50 yards from the cabin. There, partially obscured by shadow but unmistakable, stood the mother bear. The sunlight caught her fur, revealing the distinctive lighter patch on her shoulder that Savannah remembered from their encounter. Beside her, the cub romped in the tall grass, occasionally standing on its hind legs to survey the cabin. Savannah's heart hammered in her chest as she scooped Lily into her arms and backed away from the window. "It's okay, sweetie," she murmured, though whether she was reassuring Lily or herself she wasn't certain. "We'll just stay inside until they go away." But Lily squirmed in her arms, reaching back toward the window. "No, Mama, bear friends. We helped Bear, remember?" "Yes, baby, we helped them." "But they're wild animals. They need to stay in the forest where they belong." Lily's face crumpled in disappointment, but she stopped struggling. Savannah watched, hardly daring to breathe, as the mother bear took a few steps closer to the cabin. The animal moved with a slight limp, the only visible reminder of her injury. She paused at the edge of their yard, raised her massive head, and seemed to look directly at the window where Savannah stood. For a long, breathless moment, their eyes met across the distance. Then, with deliberate movements, the bear lowered something from her mouth onto the ground. A dark object Savannah couldn't identify from this distance. The bear nudged it with her nose, as if ensuring it was properly positioned, then backed away slowly, her eyes never leaving the window. When the bears had disappeared back into the forest, Savannah waited another 15 minutes before cautiously stepping onto the porch, Lily secure on her hip. "Bear left present," Lily announced confidently, pointing toward the spot where the animal had stood. Curiosity overcame caution. Keeping a watchful eye on the forest, Savannah approached the place where the bear had left her mysterious offering. What she found made her gasp in disbelief. There, arranged in a neat pile, were wild raspberries, the same kind Savannah had been planning to pick on the day of their encounter. But these weren't just randomly gathered berries. They were carefully selected, each one ripe and perfect, placed atop a large maple leaf like a natural serving platter. "A gift," Savannah whispered, unable to process what this might mean. Wild animals didn't bring offerings to humans. It wasn't possible. And yet, the evidence was literally at her feet. Lily clapped her hands. "Yummy berries! Bear say thank you." Savannah stared at her daughter, wondering not for the first time if children possessed some innate understanding of the natural world that adults lost as they grew older. The simplicity with which Lily accepted this extraordinary situation made Savannah question her own bewilderment. That evening, when Connor returned and Savannah showed him the maple leaf, now washed and preserved between the pages of a book, his reaction was a mixture of amazement and concern. "This isn't normal, Savannah," he said, pacing the kitchen while Lily played with blocks on the floor. "Bears don't bring gifts. They don't remember humans who help them. They certainly don't form friendships." "I know," Savannah admitted, "but I saw it happen, and it's not the first time she's been watching us. I've felt eyes on me when I hang laundry or work in the garden. Connor, I think she's been keeping track of us." Connor ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Savannah recognized as a sign of his internal struggle. "Maybe we should contact a wildlife expert, or the game warden, and tell them what? That we have a bear bringing us fruit baskets? They'll think we're crazy, or worse, they might decide she's too habituated to humans, and you know what happens then." The unspoken threat hung in the air between them. Bears that grew too comfortable around humans often ended up being relocated or euthanized. Neither option sat well with Savannah after all they'd been through. "Let's just wait and see," she suggested. "Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe she was just clearing a debt in her own way." Connor nodded reluctantly, but Savannah could see he wasn't convinced. That night, as they lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the forest through the open window, he whispered, "Just promise me you won't encourage this. Whatever it is, don't feed her, don't try to interact, for all our sakes." Savannah agreed, though a part of her already felt a connection to the mother bear that defied logical explanation. She drifted to sleep, wondering what other surprises the forest might have in store for them. The answer came sooner than expected. Just after dawn the next morning, Savannah awoke to the sound of Lily's delighted laughter coming through the baby monitor. Groggily, she reached for Connor, only to find his side of the bed empty. He must have gotten up early to fix the leak in the roof, she thought. Then Lily's voice came clear through the monitor. "Big Bear, funny. Do again." Savannah bolted upright, instantly wide awake and filled with terror. She sprinted to Lily's room, heart in her throat, expecting the worst. But the room was empty, the window open to the cool morning breeze. On the floor lay Lily's stuffed rabbit, as if dropped in haste. "Lily!" Savannah screamed, rushing to the window. "Connor!" Her husband's voice answered immediately from outside. "We're here! Savannah, come quickly." The tone of his voice wasn't panicked, it was awestruck. Savannah raced down the stairs and out the back door, barefoot and still in her nightgown. The sight that greeted her in the backyard stopped her in her tracks. Connor stood at the edge of the yard, Lily perched safely on his shoulders. Before them, about 20 feet away, the mother bear sat on her haunches while her cub performed what could only be described as acrobatics, rolling, tumbling, and standing on its hind legs in a display that seemed deliberately playful. "She's been doing this for 10 minutes, Connor said quietly as Savannah approached. "It's like she's entertaining Lily." Indeed, each time the cub completed a new trick, Lily would clap and laugh, and the mother bear would nudge her cub as if encouraging it to continue. The scene was so bizarre, so contrary to everything Savannah thought she knew about wild animals, that she wondered briefly if she was still asleep. "This isn't happening," she whispered. "Bears don't perform." Connor shook his head slowly. "I thought the same thing when I came out and found Lily watching them from the porch. But Savannah, look at them. They're clearly interacting, responding to each other." As if to prove his point, the bear cub finished a particularly impressive somersault and looked directly at Lily, who giggled and called out, "Good baby bear." The mother bear made a soft huffing sound that almost resembled pride. "I don't understand," Savannah said, her voice trembling. "Why would they do this? What do they want from us?" Connor had no answer, but as they watched the extraordinary scene unfold, a movement at the forest edge caught Savannah's attention. A flash of orange, distinctly human-made. A cold dread settled in her stomach. "Connor," she whispered urgently, "there's someone in the trees, watching." Connor's body tensed, but he kept his movements casual, shifting position slightly to follow her gaze without alarming the bears. Sure enough, partially concealed behind a large oak, stood a figure in an orange vest, the distinctive uniform of the county game wardens. "How long do you think he's been there?" Connor murmured. "Long enough," Savannah replied grimly. As if sensing the change in atmosphere, the mother bear rose to her feet, calling her cub with a low grunt. The pair retreated into the forest without haste, the cub turning once to look back at Lily before disappearing among the trees. When they were gone, the figure in orange stepped out of the shadows and approached the yard. It was Jacob Mitchell, the local game warden whom Connor had met briefly when they first moved to the cabin. "Morning, folks," Jacob called, his weathered face unreadable. "Mind if we have a chat?" Savannah's arms tightened around Lily protectively as Connor invited the warden onto the porch. The three adults sat in awkward silence for a moment before Jacob cleared his throat. "So," he began, "want to tell me how long you've been acquainted with those bears?" The careful neutrality in his tone gave Savannah a flicker of hope. He hadn't immediately mentioned culling or relocation. Perhaps there was a chance to explain. Connor met the warden's gaze steadily. "About 3 weeks ago, we found the mother trapped under a fallen tree. We helped free her. This is the 3rd time they've returned since then." Jacob's eyebrows rose. "You helped free a trapped female brown bear, and lived to tell about it." "It wasn't a conscious decision," Savannah admitted. "Our daughter, well, it's complicated." "I've got time," Jacob said, settling back in his chair. So they told him everything: the fallen tree, Lily's fearless approach, the poachers they'd scared away, and now the increasingly deliberate visits from the bear family. As they spoke, Jacob's expression shifted from skepticism to fascination. "In 20 years as a game warden, I've never heard anything like this," he said when they finished. "Bears don't form bonds with humans. It goes against everything we know about their behavior." "We know how it sounds," Connor said. "If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it either." Jacob removed his hat and ran a hand through his graying hair. The problem is, I did see it, and now I've got a decision to make. He fixed them with a serious look. Bears that lose their fear of humans typically end badly, for the bears, and sometimes for the humans too. Savannah felt her heart sink. Are you going to remove them? That would be protocol, Jacob admitted. But this situation isn't exactly covered in the handbook. He frowned thoughtfully. The mother is clearly still teaching her cub to hunt and forage naturally. They're not seeking food from you, which is unusual for habituated bears, and that display I witnessed. He shook his head in wonder. That was something else entirely. So, what happens now? Connor asked. Jacob replaced his hat and stood. Officially, I need to report bear activity near human habitation, but my reports don't need to specify the unusual nature of the interaction. His eyes softened as they fell on Lily, who was contentedly playing with her stuffed rabbit. Let's just say I'll be keeping a close eye on the situation myself. In the meantime, I'd appreciate it if you'd call me directly if anything changes. Relief washed over Savannah. Thank you, she said sincerely. As Jacob turned to leave, he paused. One more thing. The poachers you mentioned, they wouldn't happen to be driving an old blue pickup? Tall fellow with a red beard and a shorter guy with a scar across his cheek? Connor and Savannah exchanged surprised glances. We didn't get a good look, Connor admitted. But they seemed to know the area well. Jacob's expression hardened. The Blackwell brothers. Been trying to catch them in the act for years. If you see them again, don't confront them. Those men are dangerous. Call me immediately. He handed Connor a card with his personal cell number. After the warden left, Savannah sat heavily on the porch steps, the morning's events catching up with her. That was close, she murmured. Connor sat beside her. Lily nestled between them. We got lucky. Mitchell seems reasonable. But he's right, Connor, this isn't normal. What if... Savannah hesitated, trying to articulate the strange thought that had been forming in her mind. What if there's something special about these bears? Something different? Connor gave her a skeptical look. You mean like they're supernatural or something? No, not exactly. But animals can be intelligent in ways we don't fully understand. Maybe this mother bear is exceptional somehow. Maybe she's learned to read situations, to recognize intention. She looked toward the forest. Maybe she understands gratitude. Before Connor could respond, the distant crack of a gunshot echoed through the valley. Savannah stiffened, her eyes flying to Connor's. Hunting season doesn't start for months, he said, already rising to his feet. A second shot followed, then a third. And then, cutting through the morning air with chilling clarity, came a sound that made Savannah's blood run cold, the agonized roar of a bear in pain. The poachers, Savannah whispered, her face draining of color. They came back. Connor was already moving, grabbing his jacket and the hunting rifle he kept locked in the hall closet. Call Mitchell, he instructed, checking that the rifle was loaded. Tell him exactly what we heard and where. I'm going to see if I can find where the shots came from. Connor, no. Savannah grabbed his arm. It's too dangerous. Those men are armed. So am I, he replied grimly. And if they've hurt that bear after everything... He shook his head, unable to finish the thought. I'm not going to confront them, just locate them so Mitchell knows where to look. Savannah wanted to argue further, but the determined set of Connor's jaw told her it would be futile. Instead, she pressed a quick kiss to his lips. Be careful, please. As Connor disappeared into the trees, Savannah fumbled for her phone and dialed the number Jacob had given them. The call went straight to voicemail. She left an urgent message, then paced the porch anxiously, Lily watching her with solemn eyes. "Bear hurt?" Lily asked softly. Savannah gathered her daughter close, unsure how to answer. "I don't know, baby. I hope not." The minutes stretched into an hour, each passing moment increasing Savannah's anxiety. Just as she was debating whether to call for additional help, movement at the forest edge caught her eye. Her relief at seeing Connor emerge from the trees quickly turned to horror as she realized he was half carrying, half dragging something large and dark. The bear cub. Savannah ran to help, gasping at the sight of blood matting the cub's fur. "Is it alive?" Connor confirmed, his face grim with effort, but badly wounded. Gunshot to the shoulder. I found it hiding under a fallen log, whimpering, no sign of the mother. Together, they managed to bring the injured cub to the covered porch. It was surprisingly heavy for its young age, perhaps 80 pounds of dead weight. The creature's eyes were half closed in pain or shock, its breathing labored. "What about the poachers?" Savannah asked as she rushed inside for towels and their first aid kit. "Gone," Connor replied, carefully examining the wound. "But they left evidence everywhere, shell casings, beer cans, cigarette butts. Mitchell will have plenty to work with when he gets here." Savannah returned with supplies and a large basin of warm water. "What about the mother bear? Did you see any sign of her?" Connor's expression grew even more somber. "Blood trail leading deeper into the woods. A lot of blood, Savannah. If they hit her vital organs." He didn't need to finish the thought. As they cleaned the cub's wound as best they could, Lily watched with tears streaming down her face. "Fix baby bear," she pleaded, her small voice breaking Savannah's heart. "We're trying, sweetheart," Savannah assured her, though she knew their basic first aid supplies were woefully inadequate for treating a gunshot wound, especially in a wild animal. "We need a vet," Connor said, applying pressure to slow the bleeding. "Or Mitchell, someone who knows what to do for wildlife injuries." As if summoned by their desperation, the sound of a vehicle approaching reached them. Moments later, Jacob Mitchell's Forest Service truck pulled up, and the game warden jumped out, his face registering shock at the scene on their porch. "What in God's name?" he began, then saw the injured cub and immediately shifted to professional mode. From the truck, he retrieved a large medical kit and a tranquilizer gun. "How long ago was it shot?" "About an hour, maybe more," Connor replied, moving aside to give Jacob room to work. "I found it about half a mile east, near the old lightning-struck pine." Jacob nodded as he prepared a small dose of tranquilizer. "This will keep it calm while I examine the wound." "Did you see the mother?" "No, but there was a blood trail heading north. A lot of blood." Jacob's expression darkened as he administered the tranquilizer to the now weakly struggling cub. "The Blackwells, I assume. I found their truck parked off the logging road. Called for backup, but it'll be a while before anyone gets here." As the tranquilizer took effect, Jacob began examining the wound with practiced efficiency. Bullet went clean through the shoulder, missed the vital organs. With proper care, it should survive. He looked up at them, his face grave. "But a cub this young won't make it without its mother, if she's dead." "Don't say that," Savannah interrupted, conscious of Lily's attentive presence. "There has to be something we can do. Some way to find her." Jacob hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. "There might be, but it's unorthodox, possibly dangerous, and definitely not in any wildlife management handbook." "Tell us," Connor urged. "Bears have an exceptional sense of smell. If the mother is alive, she'll be frantically searching for her cub. If we can safely transport the cub to roughly where you found it, its scent might draw her out." He fixed them with a serious look. But if she's badly wounded, she'll be even more dangerous than usual. This isn't without risk. We'll do it, Savannah said without hesitation, surprising even herself with her certainty. At Connor's questioning look, she added, We can't just let them die, not after everything. Connor nodded slowly. Agreed, but Lily stays here, maybe with a neighbor. No time, Jacob countered, already gathering supplies to stabilize the cub for transport. Backup will be here within the hour. They can keep an eye on your daughter while we search. He paused, giving them a chance to reconsider. Last chance to back out. No one would blame you for leaving this to the professionals. Savannah and Connor exchanged a look, years of marriage allowing them to communicate volumes without words. Finally, Connor turned to Jacob. We're in. Just tell us what to do. Within 20 minutes, they had the tranquilized cub secured in a large dog crate in the back of Jacob's truck. A Forest Service officer arrived to stay with Lily, who cried when she realized she couldn't go with them but eventually settled when Savannah explained they were going to find the mama bear. Bring Bear home, Lily instructed solemnly as they prepared to leave. Both bears. We'll try, baby, Savannah promised, though she knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep. The drive to the site where Connor had found the cub was tense and silent. Jacob parked the truck on an old logging road, and they proceeded on foot, Connor carrying the crate with Jacob's help, while Savannah stayed alert for any sign of the poachers returning. Here, Connor said when they reached a small clearing. I found it hiding under that fallen log. Jacob surveyed the area with a professional eye. Good cover, access to water, multiple escape routes. If the mother is alive and mobile, this is where she'd come back to. He helped Connor set down the crate. Now we wait, at a safe distance. They retreated to a dense thicket about 50 yards away, where they could observe the clearing without being immediately visible. Jacob kept his tranquilizer gun ready, and Connor held his rifle, though Savannah noted he kept the safety engaged. Minutes stretched into a half hour, then an hour. The forest was unnaturally quiet, as if holding its breath. The sedated cub had begun to stir in its crate, making soft whimpering sounds that carried in the still air. Maybe she's gone too far to hear, Savannah whispered, the hope in her voice fading with each passing minute. Jacob shook his head grimly. If she could move at all, she'd stay in the area, searching. The fact that she hasn't appeared yet suggests... He didn't finish the sentence. Suddenly, Connor tensed beside her. Movement, he breathed. 10 o'clock, in those junipers. Savannah strained her eyes, seeing nothing at first. Then a shadow detached itself from the deeper shadows of the forest, large, moving with painful slowness, but with unmistakable purpose. The mother bear emerged into the clearing, her massive form listing to one side, dark blood matting her fur. She's alive, Savannah whispered, relief and horror mingling at the sight of the wounded animal. Jacob raised his binoculars. Hit in the hindquarters and possibly the side. She's losing blood but moving under her own power. That's a good sign. The mother bear paused, raising her head to test the air. When the scent of her cub reached her, she made a sound Savannah had never heard before, a low, keening moan that conveyed such profound relief and love that it brought tears to Savannah's eyes. With renewed energy, the bear moved toward the crate, sniffing intently. Now comes the tricky part, Jacob murmured. She needs to understand we're trying to help, not hurt. If she feels threatened... The bear reached the crate and began circling it anxiously, occasionally pawing at the door. The cub inside responded with excited whimpers, trying to reach its mother through the bars. I think it's time, Connor said quietly. If we're going to help them, it has to be now, while she's focused on the cub. Jacob nodded reluctantly. I'll try to get close enough for a clear tranquilizer shot. If I can sedate her, I can treat her wounds here, or call for transport to a wildlife rehabilitation center. Let me go first, Savannah said suddenly. Both men turned to stare at her as if she'd lost her mind. Absolutely not, Connor began, but Savannah cut him off with a determined look. She knows me. She remembers I helped before. At Jacob's skeptical expression, she added, I know how it sounds, but you saw how they were with Lily. There's something special about this bear. She understands more than we think. Or she's a wounded wild animal who will attack anything that approaches her cub, Jacob countered. This isn't a Disney movie, Mrs. Reed. I know that, Savannah replied calmly. But I also know what I've seen, what we've all seen. She met Connor's worried gaze. I'll be careful. At the first sign of aggression, I'll back away, but I have to try. After a tense moment, Connor nodded reluctantly. I'll be right behind you, he promised, his voice thick with emotion. Jacob looked between them, clearly torn between protocol and the extraordinary circumstances. Finally, he sighed. I'll cover you from here with the tranquilizer gun. Any sudden movements from her, any sign she's going to charge, and I'll take the shot. Understood? Savannah nodded, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. She took a deep breath and stepped out from their hiding place, moving slowly into the clearing. The mother bear's head jerked up immediately, her dark eyes locking onto Savannah with an intensity that froze the air in her lungs. It's me, Savannah called softly, keeping her voice low and gentle. We helped you before, remember? Under the tree. We want to help again. The bear growled, a low rumble of warning that vibrated through the clearing. Behind her, Savannah heard Jacob readying the tranquilizer gun. Not yet, she called over her shoulder, never taking her eyes off the bear. She's just afraid. Step by careful step, Savannah moved closer, her hands open at her sides in a gesture of peace. The mother bear watched her approach, her massive body tense but not aggressive. When Savannah was about 15 feet away, she stopped, sensing an invisible boundary. Your baby is going to be okay, she said, nodding toward the crate. But you need help too. You're hurt badly. The bear huffed, her breath visible in the cool forest air. For a breathless moment, Savannah thought she might retreat or charge. Instead, the massive animal did something astonishing. She sank slowly to the ground, her wounded side heaving with exhaustion, and laid her head on her paws in what could only be described as surrender. Jacob, Savannah called without turning. I think she's letting us help her. The game warden emerged cautiously from the thicket, tranquilizer gun still at the ready, but his expression one of amazement. I've never seen anything like this, he admitted as he approached. In 20 years on the job, I've never... Working carefully together, they sedated both bears with minimal doses, just enough to keep them calm while Jacob treated their wounds. The cub's injury was serious but straightforward. The bullet had passed through muscle without hitting bone or vital organs. The mother's wounds were more severe. One bullet lodged near her hip, another grazing her side. Through it all, Savannah stayed by the mother bear's head, stroking her fur and murmuring reassurances as Jacob worked. She'll need surgery for the hip, Jacob said finally, packing up his field kit. And antibiotics, proper medical care, they both will. The Wildlife Center? Connor asked. Jacob nodded. I've already called. They're sending a transport vehicle. He hesitated, then added with rare emotion, These bears have a fighting chance now, thanks to you folks. Not many would have done what you did today." As they waited for the transport to arrive, Savannah sat close to the sedated mother bear, overwhelmed by the bond she felt with this wild creature. "We'll come visit you," she promised softly. "When you're healed, Lily will want to see you both." By sunset, both bears had been carefully loaded into the Wildlife Center's specialized vehicle. As Savannah watched them drive away, a profound sense of loss washed over her, as if something precious had been taken from her life. Connor's arm wrapped around her shoulders, his strength a silent comfort. "Did we do the right thing?" she whispered. "Sending them away?" "We saved their lives," he answered simply. "That has to be right." The weeks that followed were strangely empty. Lily would still go to the window each morning, pressing her small hands against the glass and calling for her bear friends. Each time, Savannah's heart broke a little more as she explained that the bears were at the doctor's, getting better. Regular updates from Jacob brought some comfort. Both bears were recovering well. The Wildlife Center staff were amazed at how cooperative the mother bear was during treatments, almost as if she understood they were helping her. The cub had become something of a celebrity at the center, charming everyone with its playful antics once it began feeling better. "They're talking about releasing them back into the wild next month," Jacob informed them during one visit. "Probably further north, away from areas where hunters might—" He trailed off, aware of Lily listening nearby. "Away from here, you mean," Savannah said, not bothering to hide her disappointment. Jacob nodded sympathetically. "It's protocol. For their own safety, they need to be as far from human habitation as possible." Savannah understood the logic, but it didn't ease the ache in her heart. She had come to care deeply for these wild creatures, to feel a connection that defied explanation. The thought of never seeing them again left an emptiness she hadn't anticipated. The day of the release came during the first snowfall of winter. Savannah had resigned herself to saying goodbye from afar when Jacob appeared at their door early in the morning, his expression uncharacteristically mischievous. "Get your coats," he said by way of greeting. "All three of you. I've cleared it with the center director. You can come witness the release." The drive to the northern ridge took nearly 2 hours, with Lily chattering excitedly the entire way. The Wildlife Center's truck was already there when they arrived, 2 staff members making final preparations for the release. "Remember," one of them cautioned as they approached, "this is highly unusual. We don't normally allow civilians at releases. Stay back behind the tree line, and no matter what happens, don't approach the bears after they're released. They're wild animals returning to their natural habitat." Savannah nodded, though the reminder stung. Of course they were wild. She had never forgotten that, even during the strangest moments of their unusual connection. The crates containing the bears were positioned facing the dense forest. At a signal from the center director, the staff simultaneously opened both doors and quickly retreated. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, cautiously, the cub emerged, its fur thicker now with the approach of winter. It sniffed the air, taking a few tentative steps before turning back to look at its mother's crate. The mother bear appeared more slowly, her massive form filling the doorway as she surveyed her new surroundings. The wound on her hip had healed well, leaving only a slight hitch in her step as she moved forward to join her cub. Together they paused at the forest edge, as if gathering their courage before returning to the wild. Then, in a moment, Savannah would replay in her mind countless times in the years to come. Both bears turned. Not toward the forest and freedom, but back toward the humans watching from a distance. The mother bear raised her head, nostrils flaring as she caught their scent on the breeze. "She knows we're here," Savannah whispered, tears blurring her vision. For a breathless moment, the mother bear stared directly at them. Then, with deliberate movements that could not be mistaken for anything but intentional, she rose on her hind legs, a posture bears rarely took without provocation, and seemed to look straight at Lily. "Bear!" Lily cried in delight, straining against Connor's firm hold. The bear remained upright for several seconds, a living monument against the snow-dusted forest. Then she dropped back to all fours, nudged her cub gently, and together they disappeared into the trees, wild creatures returning to where they belonged. The wildlife staff exchanged bewildered glances. "That was unusual," the director murmured. But Savannah understood. It wasn't a random behavior or a coincidence. It was a goodbye. That night, as they drove home through gently falling snow, Lily fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from the day's excitement. Connor reached across to take Savannah's hand, his eyes briefly leaving the road to meet hers. "You okay?" he asked softly. Savannah nodded, surprised to find she meant it. They're where they should be, wild and free. "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" She smiled, remembering the deliberate way the mother bear had looked back at them. "I don't know, but I like to think they'll remember us, somewhere deep in whatever bears use for memory." "The way Lily will remember them," Connor agreed, "even if the details fade." And they did fade as the years passed. Lily grew from a toddler to a child who loved animals with a passion that surprised no one who knew her history. She would eventually attend veterinary school, specializing in wildlife medicine, a career choice that seemed written in her stars from that fateful day beneath the fallen tree. The family stayed in their cabin in the woods, and though they occasionally glimpsed bears in the distance, none ever approached their home again. Jacob Mitchell retired as game warden, but remained a close family friend, often joining them for holiday dinners where the conversation inevitably turned to "that crazy summer with the bears," as he called it. The poachers, the Blackwell brothers, were eventually caught and prosecuted, their hunting licenses permanently revoked. The evidence Jacob had collected from their abandoned camp proved instrumental in the case against them. Life moved on, as it always does, with the bear incident gradually becoming a story they told, a remarkable chapter in their family history, but no longer a daily presence in their lives, until one crisp autumn morning, nearly 15 years later. Savannah, now with strands of silver threading through her hair, was alone at the cabin. Connor had taken their younger son fishing, and Lily was home from college for the weekend but had gone into town for supplies. Savannah was hanging laundry on the line when she felt it, that familiar prickling sensation of being watched. She turned slowly, her heart quickening as her eyes scanned the tree line. There, half hidden in shadow, stood a massive brown bear. For a moment, Savannah thought she was imagining things, projecting her memories onto a random wildlife sighting. But then she noticed the distinctive lighter patch on the bear's shoulder, now faded with age but unmistakable. "It can't be," she whispered, frozen in place, as the bear stepped fully into the clearing. The animal moved with the deliberate grace of maturity, her once wounded hip showing only the faintest hint of stiffness. She paused at the yard's edge, exactly as she had done years before, and fixed Savannah with an intelligent gaze that stripped away the intervening years in an instant. Savannah found herself walking forward, drawn by a connection that had somehow survived across time and distance. She stopped a respectful distance away, hardly daring to believe what her heart already knew. "You came back," she said simply. The bear huffed softly, a sound Savannah remembered from another lifetime. Then, with careful movements, she lowered something from her mouth onto the ground. a cluster of wild raspberries arranged on a maple leaf. Tears spilled freely down Savannah's cheeks as she understood the message in this extraordinary gesture. Not just recognition, not just memory, but something deeper. A bond that transcended the barriers between human and wild, between cognitive understanding and instinctive knowing. The bear lingered only a moment longer before turning back toward the forest. At the edge of the trees, she paused, looking back once as if to ensure her gift had been received. Then she was gone, disappearing into the wild that was her home. Savannah carefully picked up the leaf with its precious cargo, cradling it as gently as she once had held her daughter. She would wait for Lily to return, to share this miracle with the child who had started it all, who had seen with innocent eyes what adults were too conditioned to believe. That compassion could bridge even the wildest divides, that kindness left imprints too deep to be erased by time or distance. And she would tell Lily what she now knew with unshakable certainty, that love, in all its forms, was the most untamable force in nature. More powerful than instinct, more enduring than logic. Wilder even than the heart of a bear. Did this moving story warm your heart? Share it to remind us all that compassion transcends every boundary. Even when faced with danger, a small act of kindness can bridge worlds and spark hope where there was only fear.